Hello and welcome to another episode of Market Watch. Today we revisit the real estate, property development and infrastructure industries of the Sri Lankan economy. It is one of the more talked about sectors of the economy, and we have with us today joining from Access Engineering PLC, we have the Managing Director Mr. Christopher Joshua joining us to give his views on the industry. Thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Joshua. To start off proceedings, we'd like your thoughts on the overall real estate, property and infrastructure industries, considering the interest that it's been receiving. I mean, is it in a boom or is it actually you're looking at a bubble? What are your thoughts on the industries?
Yes, of course, there have been a lot of comments on the real estate industry in particular. Before going into that, I'll just mention that the total construction industry from a perspective so that you can have a total overall view.
Yes.
The construction industry still remains in a growth phase, rapid growth phase. We have been following it up quite clearly, and it has been boosted by the major infrastructure development projects, mainly funded by bilateral and multilateral funding agencies. Chinese have become one of the bigger bilateral funding agencies, and they have implemented a lot of projects, as you know. The last year, the industry contributed almost 8.7% to the GDP. That's about, I think, 950 billion rupees, and a year-on-year growth of 12%, where the GDP grew by 4.1%. So it's a growing market, a growth industry. So obviously, there is a lot of public opinion and interest in it.
Yes.
On the real estate perspective, of course, you have seen, of course, the post-war boom, construction boom, and the investment boom, and a lot of property development projects have been happening. Of course, there have been a lot of talk and speculation, or I don't know, whatever you call it, about this having the property might be a property bubble, especially in the high-end sector, because
yes,
according to what I read, there's about 3,000 high-end property units, housing units, condominium units coming into the market within the next 2-3 years. But those developers are well-seasoned developers. If you see them, and they know exactly what they are doing. And but the feedback we get is that most of them have been, they are confident that they've been taken or they will be taken. As in any developed city, there's a migration towards the city. Urbanization is pretty low, 18%, I believe. So there is room in that sense, and of course, the high-end ones, of course, will be for investors and maybe expatriate communities, and those developers have reached those people. We also have had our own experience in the one of the verticals in the property sector, the office rental sector, where we built a office tower just next to Access Towers. Colombo has about 1 million square foot of A-grade office space, plus another 2 million within the central business district. We added 200,000 square foot with Access Tower 2, and we scheduled for completion by 31st July. And even prior to completion, the whole building was taken, 200,000 square feet of A-grade office. So that shows there's big demand, and our forecast did beat our expectations and forecast. And of course, we basically even had a informal opening because of the tenants were very keen to start working. So there is demand. We have seen it ourselves, and going forward with the industry expanding, with urban the population migrating to the city, we see there is still demand.
Right. Talking about the infrastructure sector itself, I mean, it's a big part of access operations also. How much of a contribution does the government spending play a role with regard to this, the conduciveness of the environment for infrastructure projects to take off? What can we expect?
Well, most of the bigger infrastructure projects, as I told you, are bilateral or multilateral funded projects. Multilateral is ADB, World Bank projects. Their credit lines have been there throughout the years, and big tranches of investment there, of course, in the water sector, in the education sector, in the power sector, and in the road sector. Most investments, most finance support that type of infrastructure development projects. Then there's a whole lot of bilateral projects. Few years ago, Japanese were the biggest bilateral funder to Sri Lanka through the JICA program. Currently, of course, the Chinese are the biggest bilateral funder to this country. So those projects, the funding is available, and the implementation is foreseen well. So it's not an expenditure from the government capital budget. Of course, debt financing is there. It's a burden to the government to finance the debt, but it is not directly from the government capital budget allocation to do the bigger projects. They are mainly on this concessional and bilateral finance.
Right.
So that seems to be going forward.
Okay. When we look at these segments, I mean, the construction sector does have its sub-segments, but in the more recent past, the real estate, property development and infrastructure projects are the ones which seem to make most of the noise. What can we expect if you were to rank them in terms of the growth, the profitability potentials, and likewise, what can we expect for these individual sectors in the near term and maybe the longer term opportunities?
From a construction company perspective, of course, the more the complex the project is, the bigger the opportunity. Now, for example, of course, the opportunities, you don't have to wait for opportunity to go looking for opportunities, or go and create an opportunity for yourself. I'll give you an example to explain this a little better. When the ITC wanted the diaphragm wall, at least 3 basements in the development next to Shangri-La.
Right.
So they called for tenders to do a second piling wall, which value was about 2.5 billion rupees. So we went there, saw the opportunity, gave a value proposition to do a diaphragm wall instead, 30% cheaper and more efficient. So the international developer realized straight away that the value in the proposition, and they took it, and of course both people were happy, the customer was happy, the contractor was very happy. So much so that diaphragm wall technology is now taken forward to the Havelock City development which we are doing now, the new Odell Mall development. They're doing 5 basements there. So it's a matter of, look, when you have opportunity, creating a further opportunity for it, then you can maximize your resources and your value addition. So the infrastructure has a bigger room than traditional buildings, if you ask me. It's basically concrete, brick and mortar and reinforcement. So not much, everybody knows, the inputs there, and there is no real room for value addition.
Right. I think talking about the value addition and the opportunism which Access itself gives is probably among the factors which gave rise to your best financial year, which was the most recently concluded financial year. What were the catalysts and the driving force behind this best year so far?
Okay. As a contract, every contractor has plant and equipment, but the differentiation factor is the knowledge and human capital. Basically, as a knowledge-based enterprise, we have some of the best talent in the industry. Currently, we employ more than 150 engineering graduates, mostly from the local universities. Of course, we are the preferred employer in the industry, and our staff retention is more than 95%, which is unparalleled in the industry. So basically, the knowledge we have, that knowledge we utilize to give better solution to the clients, and invest in, of course, innovative technology. Nothing to invent here, the construction is not been here there for ages, but innovative solutions to the country. One thing is to give speedier construction time and a cost-effective solution for the same requirement. So that has worked well for us. The people recognize us to give that value addition in our business, and that is the differentiating factor. So that has been growing from the inception of the company. And I was just analyzing the last 6 years. During the last 6 years alone, the company has had a year-on-year growth on the top line of 30% and on the bottom line of 18%, which is consistent. So it's not just 1 year, it's been performing quite consistently.
Yeah, I think it's an important point that you brought forward. I mean, the modern economy is growing from a traditional business where you have a demand and supply to more innovation and technology driven economies, which is what Access is also putting forward across, which is a good news. What sort of sectors is the company looking at into the future in terms of their driving the growth for the futures in these individual sectors?
The core business, yes, because still it's a growing industry. In the medium term, we see the industry still growing. So we're very well backward integrated. Last year, our production plants gave us almost 25% of our revenue, and we produce some of the best asphalt and concrete in this country, and we sell more than 50% of the production to the private sector. So that is a growth vertical for us. And of course, the other natural integration is forward integration. As a contractor, we know construction pretty well. We have our own engineering design office, and we've done a lot of innovative construction methods, material, formwork, systems, all that integrated into our construction business. So to get that value, we want to also bring that value into the property development sector, where Access Tower 2, the example I told you before, it was a fantastic value proposition, very well built building, with again very modern technology where we use post tensioning, gave you a lot of better views, better footprints, better spans. Just to give you an example, this particular building, Access Tower 1, which we are seated here, on a 9,000 square foot footplate, we will have about 9 columns. Columns, it serves everybody. In that building, in a 9,000 square foot footprint, 9,300, you have only one visible column.
Oh, okay.
So when somebody goes, they are wowed by it. It's like a ballroom, so they want to take office space. So that type of technology comes in. So that is the value creation for the user. So that we want to take into the property development sector. So we are engaged in currently 2 projects. One project is a joint venture with the Iranian company Blue Star. We are doing a condominium in Rajagiriya. That's for the upper middle class. We are doing 240 units just next to HSBC. And another interesting project where there's been a vacuum in the market, we believe, for the middle class in close proximity to the city, where we acquired the controlling stakes of a company which had a property next to Ceylon Tobacco, 5-acre property with uninterrupted views of the Colombo port. And there we are going to, this is just 2 kilometers from the Hilton, by the way. So China Harbour joined us there because they also they are doing this port city, the big investor, having a long-term relationship with them as a contracting partner. Mm-hmm. And they were also very keen to join us. So they are also a 30% equity stake in that company. And that is actually their first investment, real estate investment in this country.
Okay.
Because Port City is the bigger one, which is still to materialize. And we are trying to give something affordable at a very good location. So we are trying to target this middle class, which had no affordable housing within the city. I think on 320 maybe 5 years ago, it was a little more affordable. But then, of course, I see the secondary market prices, that better than me.
Yes.
Maybe 3 times the original price people paid. So it has not become any more affordable. So this is a good location, and that's an area. And then, of course, we secured a land bank in Malabe. We, together with Horizon Holdings, we have a land bank of about 21 acres there in Malabe, just behind the Dr. Neville Fernando Hospital. And Malabe is another potential growth area for development with all it is a zone for education and IT-related industry. Yes. And people, residential area also with, of course, the urban transportation network planned there. So, but since these 2 projects came in earlier, that will be coming a little later.
Right. When you look at the scale, the sophistications, the innovation technology which you bring to the table, how do you manage your margins and control your costs?
That's a big challenge, because especially from the shareholders' perspective, they see margins, of course.
Yes.
First year they asked us, you have good margins. Second year said good margin. When we showed it over 6 years, they said, okay, fine, you're doing well, and now we believe you. So that's a continuous challenge. That's what the shareholders want also as a listed company. So that is why the continuous innovation into new innovative construction methods only can maintain to create this value. So we do that. And another reason for the group to enter into the property sector also is to try to sustain this, because as a contractor developer, we will have more privy to the construction, the design input with the construction experience, where you can do more cost-effective construction, cost-effective design, where the construction will be more simplified and hopefully add more cost benefit.
Right. Just on a concluding remark, if I go back to one of the interviews with the chairman, he happened to mention, in the long run, looking back at the company, he will be disappointed if it's still recognized as a construction company. What is the company doing to head off in this direction per se?
Yeah, what he really meant was, okay, the core business is construction, and we have to use that advantage to leverage to expand our business out of with synergies to the core business. That is why we are doing, like I told you, last year we did 20% of our bottom top line contribution came from our plants and plant and equipment, backward integration from production plants. Going forward, we see a big chunk coming from the property development sector. So maybe then if the majority of the contribution is coming from the property development sector, people might recognize us not as an engineering company, as a good property development company. And the potential in the property development is quite phenomenal when you see the investments like the Port City. I mean, of course, we are talking about us at our scale, but the Port City is a different scale. You know, from the presentations I have seen of the Port City, the land field is $1.4 billion US, and the infrastructure development alone there will go to the magnitude of maybe $20 billion, 1/3 of our GDP. You know,
Yes.
so that is the potential the industry has, and especially in the property development sector. So that seems there's a lot of growth potential there.
Probably. So that concludes our insights into access engineering and of course the industry in terms of the opportunity it has to offer. We extend our gratitude. Thank you once again, Mr. Joshua, for joining us. We hope our viewers found the discussion as insightful as we did, and do join us next week for another episode. Until then, have a great weekend.